Hello, Professor Morgan here, talking about genre. So, as a published author, sometimes people will say, "Hey, what genre do you write in?" Or what kind of books do you write? And they're asking basically what genres I write in. And genre is a big fancy word that means genre. I don't, well, actually, if we look at the definition, it is it's the meaning comes from the same Latin origin as genus, meaning it belongs to the same group or family. Okay, so you think about, it's like different families have certain characteristics about them, and they're again, we're not talking about necessarily like family and the mother father kids kind of a thing, whatever. As much as it's like, okay, this kind of these things belong together. These are some of the common characteristics that you would see in this particular thing, and we're going to look at some of the genres, not only in books but also kind of in movies and TV to kind of get an understanding of what some of these genres are. So let's look at the first one, romance. Romance, traditionally deals with an example would be Pride and Prejudice. It's there's more to it than just this, but it really the main aspect is around some sort of romantic element, relationships between two people, and of a romantic nature, and the struggles that happen with relationships, and a lot of them have happy endings, and sometimes they don't have happy endings, but that's really the main you know gist of it, is the search for love, I guess, to oversimplify it. When it comes to literary fiction, this is just a big fancy term that it's like, okay, well, it's not really, it's written kind of like um, in its own time frame, yet it is fiction, meaning that it's not representing stuff that is, it's maybe resembling things that are going on, but it isn't really about something that's really happening. That's kind of an oversimplification of the definition. The Great Gatsby was written at a time frame that and it's been very influential for years, but it reflects a time in America that's no longer here. But we can get a sense of the time and place and the events, but the events weren't real. So there's literary fiction. Okay. Then we have mystery. Someone like Agatha Christie, who, it's like basically the who done it. Often there's a murder or a crime that's been committed, and the story, is really trying to figure out, the clues that leads up to figuring out what happened and what got to this thing, and that's what drives people forward. And so that's its own genre. Then we have the Western. Larry McMurtry is very common name in the field of westerns. One of his famous books is called Lonesome Dove. This really kind of deals primarily with the West of the United States of America. Before a lot of technology, we're dealing with horses primarily as the main form of transportation. Trains were just starting. A lot of stuff to deal with farms, settling, any number, settling the land, whatever. So this is its own different genre, kind of deals with that and the struggles that they deal with those times. It can have any number of different elements, but this is definitely its own genre. Now, when it comes to science fiction, we look at an example of like the book 1984. Pure science fiction is, it takes wherever we are in our world at the time and the technology we have at the time, it imagines what technology will lead to in the future. Okay. And how it can impact, this is kind of, deeper, but yeah, how it can impact the way that humanity deals with each other. And, George Orwell wrote this book, about, kind of hypothesizing what life would be like in 1984. And, was he right and wrong? Well, it's leave that up to you to determine. Um, but primarily, it doesn't really deal with a lot of speculative, like magical elements. That's a whole different genre. Okay. That's fantasy. Fantasy is where you deal with, um, elements that, even though they could be, you know, let's say on Earth, but they're dealing with like more of kind of a magical element, or they're dealing with made up locations and such like this. They deal with more fantastical elements that cannot be described or be the result of technology. That's kind of the difference between science fiction and fantasy is like, okay, well, why can humans or the beings do things that we can't do now? It's either because they have a more advanced technology and, or that it's just magic, whatever that is. And, if you want to get real crazy, that, I think there's a quote that says, advanced forms of technology are may seem like magic. If I were to go back to, we talked about westerns before. If I were to go back in time and go back to the old west and show them a cell phone and say, hey, with this, I can talk to anybody else in the world who has a similar device. Not even that, I could show them videos and take a picture of them and show, I mean, it would blow their mind. They would think it was magic, but it's not. It's just technology. So, but when stuff is, fantasy is its own thing. But fantasy and science fiction are two distinct um, genres. They are not the same thing. And, I will tell you, it drives me nuts when I go to a bookstore or I'm searching and it's like, oh, here's a fantasy slash science fiction thing. Now, they're both speculative fiction because people are speculating on what could be happening, but they're two different genres. They're not the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't be mixed. Okay, so we have some genres that get mixed together. An example would be Star Wars. When I was a kid, and I'm old, so this is going to date me a little bit, but I was 8 years old when the first Star Wars movie came out. And at the time it was like, that's science fiction. That is totally science fiction. They have spaceships, they have laser guns, they've got lightsabers, whatever. However, they also have this little thing called the Force. Yeah, mystical stuff where Luke and Obi-Wan were able to use the Force. Guess what? That is more fantasy elements. So Star Wars is really kind of a mixture of science fiction and fantasy. And if you really want to get technical, it's like, well, the opening line of Star Wars is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So this is, instead of postulating what the technology we have now is and what it will be like in the future, which is pure science fiction, this is kind of more, it has both elements. And then another example is there was a TV show called Firefly. It was canceled after half a season. It did inspire a movie. They did do a movie. And the fun thing about this one is it's very much science fiction. It deals very much with, the humans and what technology is going to be like in the future and how they've kind of had to leave Earth because of, humanity's gotten so big. The one thing that makes this as a mixed genre is that as humans have gone to colonize, different areas, they've almost kind of gone back to Western time. So it's kind of a mixture of a Western and science fiction. So those are examples of those. And then one more, I'm very familiar with this book because I wrote it. Worked with a musician named Chris de Burgh. He wrote this song called The Mirror of the Soul. And anyway, I thought it was an excellent song with a great story, and so I contacted his management I pitched a book to them, and they agreed and got me in contact with Chris, and not only did I get his blessing, I got his insight and help with whatever. The vast majority of the story is mine. The basic storyline is his. The book is a lot of stuff that I came up with. But this is a mixed genre of historical fiction. So this takes place right after the Hundred Years' War between England and France, and this takes place in southern France just before about the year 1500. And so it's there's a lot. I mean, that's the setting. But the premise is that there's a giant diamond that falls from the sky that has like kind of, I would say, magical, maybe ethereal, maybe spiritual. I mean, but powers that people try to use for good or bad. So there's a whole lot of speculative, there's like magical elements, I guess, that takes place during this historical fiction story. So, but that is another example of mixed genres. So again, you can mix the genres together, and a lot of genres are, it's like, oh, the main. It's like, so, well, how do you determine what is the main genre? It's usually kind of like, again, with Pride and Prejudice, there could be some literary elements to it. With westerns, there may be some romance and part of it. It's really kind of what is the main overall, flavor, for lack of a better term, or emphasis of the story that will help determine the genre. But yeah, so there's your little insight on genres, and there you go.